This is hydrochloric acid. Now for many people, that's already strong enough. But 1,000 times stronger? Now we're talking. If the fumes hit your tongue, you wouldn't be eating it, it'd be eating you. In fact, it eats metals, skin, and other organic matter. While it's not a super acid, it is easily the most aggressive, dangerous acid I've ever tried to isolate. Hydrobromic acid. So hopefully, by the end of this video, I'll pull it off. I mean, I don't know yet, as I'm currently on step 1. Okay, so to rewind a bit, we're going to have to get our chemicals, which are sulfuric acid, a bromide salt, here I use potassium bromide, some sodium thiosulfate, which will come in handy later, and finally, of course, some distilled water. Alright, so the game plan to make this super strong hydrobromic acid is to mix another strong acid, sulfuric acid, with potassium bromide, which contains bromine in the form of bromide for our hydrobromic acid. A partner switching thing is going to happen here, and the hydrogen ion is going to be transferred to the bromide to form hydrobromic acid in solution, which will then be extracted through a pretty long process. By the way, in water, HCl and HBr both get leveled to the same acidity. This is called the leveling effect. But the raw HBr molecule, for example in its gaseous phase, is crazy strong. Now this is a massive jug of industrial sulfuric acid I got at a really good price, and it was such a steal. I tried transferring it into a smaller bottle so that I can pour it out easier, and of course I had to spill like a massive puddle of it in my fume hood. Like seriously, this thing is so oily and slippery. Yeah, we're not really starting off on the right foot, and it completely ruined the black paint too. You can see the struggle of me trying to neutralize this spill here. Anyways, after cleaning up this mishap, I then got a scale and measured out around 225 grams of potassium bromide. Most procedures call for sodium bromide because it's more soluble and you need less mass. But whatever, that just means I'll have to be distilling water for longer. Step 2. Next, I then got a 3-necked 1-liter round bottom flask and put it onto my hot plate. On top of that, the potassium bromide was all carefully transferred in using a powder funnel, and a good amount of water was poured in to help it dissolve. The exact quantity really doesn't matter. You just need enough to make sure the salt fully dissociates. You know, chemistry isn't always about measurements. Now, the funnel was removed and into the middle neck, I inserted a pressure equalizing addition funnel. This is where, of course, something else again goes wrong. After using a funnel to transfer in our last reagent, the sulfuric acid, into our addition funnel, it started leaking because apparently the neck was cracked and I had no idea. I didn't catch that on camera, but the acid just started pouring out. Now reviewing the footage, you can really see the tiny cracks at the neck, which were such a pain. Anyways, it is what it is, and I ended up having to use a separatory funnel to add in the sulfuric acid. Using a glass funnel, my sulfuric acid was once again transferred in, but without any spillage this time. And finally, we can do the reaction. By the way, look at how cool this thick oily liquid looks. Step 3. Reacting. You see, the addition of sulfuric acid to water is quite exothermic, and it could release a lot of heat, causing the temperature to shoot up. However, you don't want the reaction to go above 70 C. This is because at these higher temps, a side reaction dominates, where bromine gets oxidized into elemental bromine, Br2, something you really don't want to breathe in. A small amount of it will inevitably form though, as you'll see soon, and a solution will be used. Like a literal solution. So that's why I had to use a funnel. Adding in sulfuric acid slowly and dropwise was a key precaution that must be taken. But of course, before adding in the acid, I just have to quickly stir up the solution, make sure everything dissolves, and... Dissolve? Dissolve! Oh my god. Wow, now something else goes wrong here again. Look, initially I wanted to wait for all the potassium bromide to dissolve before adding in the acid. But of course, even after stirring for hours and heating it and adding water, it just wouldn't dissolve. Trust me, it's the right salt and it's not even close to saturation at this temperature. This is extremely weird, and if anyone knows why this is the case, please leave a comment. I really need your help on this one, guys. Anyways, you should technically let this stir until the solution becomes fully clear, but in my case, I just wanted to go with the reaction. It'll probably all dissolve when I distill it later nonetheless. So an excess amount of around 200 ml of sulfuric acid was slowly dripped in over the course of around 30 minutes. Also, you want to make sure to... Wait, why am I using you? As if you're actually following along with this as a tutorial. Also, when you're synthesizing your hydrobromic acid at home, as one does, you can use an ice bath as another way to keep the reaction cool and not shoot over 70 degrees Celsius. Now you might be asking, what's going on here? Look, I kinda lied to you. Hydrogen bromide is technically not being formed here. I'm sorry. I'd rather you hear it from me than like someone off of YouTube. Literally the only thing happening right now is sulfuric acid dissociating as it touches the water. We're just adding bisulfate and hydronium into the ion soup, which already had potassium and bromide chilling in it. Underwhelming, right? Until toxic red bromine starts spawning in later steps. But don't worry, this is still more interesting than 75 trials of titration. Step 4. Distillation. Now that it's been like half an hour, the addition has finished. As you can see, it took on a slight orange tinge due to elemental bromine, which is quite annoying. At least it's not yellow though. If you let it cool, you can also see some of the salts crystallize out, probably potassium bisulfate originating from the dissolved spectator ions in the reacting step. It's better to remove these before the distillation, as this would interfere with the reaction by making the distillation much slower. So what I did was I grabbed another 1 liter flask, this time an Erlenmeyer flask, and decanted only the liquid into that Erlenmeyer before going to the next step. Now we're almost ready to start the distillation, except for one more thing, which is to make a gas bubbler connected to the system. It's going to be connected via a rubber tube leading into a funnel, and that's going to be attached to like the outlet, the glass outlet thingy of the vacuum adapter. But here, technically, the bromine is what we're trying to avoid. It's the most volatile, so lots of toxic fumes will be released, and they might escape during the heating. So to save my lungs, this inverted funnel trap bubbling into an aqueous solution of sodium thiosulfate was made. By the way, is thiosulfate supposed to form a milky white solution like this? I'm just curious, it's like really opaque. Any oxidized bromine will also be instantly reduced by thiosulfate to form non-volatile bromide ions in solution, as seen through the equation shown. Okay, now after cranking up the heat, the flask heated up surprisingly quickly, and the liquid became more and more red, which was honestly kind of scaring me. It quickly came to a bubbly boil. The first few drops of liquid distilled over at a pretty low temperature and were very yellow. This is highly likely to be bromine contamination, and since all yellow chemistry is bad, I discarded this first portion. Then, when it got to around 100 C and above, I collected everything with a new flask. Even though it's slightly tainted yellow, that's fine because I'll be performing a second distillation anyways. This first one was just to get the bulk of the hydrobromic acid while separating it from any potassium bisulfate salts. Now, what's going on here is actually really cool and rarely explained. As previously mentioned, in the ion mixture we made, water and the hydronium plus bromide will come over as hydrogen bromide gas. Because these don't fly off as free ions though, in solution it's ionic, but it turns molecular as soon as it leaves the liquid phase. Bisulfate and potassium, however, have no way of leaving the flask and will be left there as non-volatile species. Now what's even stranger is that the HBr gas doesn't just come over by itself either, even though it has a boiling point of minus 67 degrees Celsius. It's dissolved, and hydrogen bromide and water distill over together as a constant boiling mixture, specifically as a maximum boiling azeotrope, due to a negative deviation from the ideal. It basically means that water and HBr hold on tighter than we assumed, because HBr doesn't just stay molecular. It dissociates and thus exhibits ion dipole attractive forces. This strength shows up as a dip in the vapor pressure, which then manifests as a peak in the boiling point. Thus, at around 124 degrees Celsius, the two distill over with the same liquid composition as solution composition, a key characteristic of azeotropes. And that composition is 48% HBr by mass, the highest concentration of the acid you can get via distillation. Why, you may ask? Well, you'll see. Step 5. Fractional distillation. Now it's been about 4 hours, and I collect most of what came over 100C, containing our HBr. It's quite dilute right now though, so we're going to have to somehow remove even more water to concentrate it to its maximum possible percentage. By the way, I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like at the very end of the distillation. It's quite thick and almost like syrupy. After transferring the distillate into a new Erlenmeyer flask, the method I'm going to use is a fractional distillation. So after cranking up the heat, I just need this to distill one more time. The fractionating, or in this case, a Vigora column, is basically just a long glass column with a high surface area to help separate out different components more cleanly. How though, you may ask? Because doesn't it seem quite magical how more glass can just give us a purer product? Here's the thing, a max boiling azeotrope is quite special. It's the last thing that comes over. Now let's go back to our graph. The blue curve represents the boiling point versus composition, and the red curve tells us the vapor composition at a certain boiling point and liquid composition. Remember that the vapor composition doesn't have to equal the liquids. You can have a small amount of a liquid that is much more volatile and thus dominate the vapor phase. Now follow me on a really interesting journey. Imagine our mixture of 20% HBr in the pot right now. On the graph, 20% corresponds to a boiling point of like 112 degrees. Then, we draw a line to look at the corresponding vapor composition, which tells us the vapor is like only 10% HBr, much richer in water. So in a simple distillation, this is probably what we're getting. But in our fractional distillation this time, imagine we're redistilling our distillate dozens of times. You can see what happens visually on the graph. In fact, that's what's happening in our column, multiple cycles of vaporization and condensation. Thus, the vapor up the column becomes successively more concentrated in water, until at the top, we're ideally just collecting pure water. Since water is being removed, the concentration of HBr in the flask will increase. The temperature may also climb up slowly as it boils off pure water, because more and more HBr is making it through our column as the composition tends towards the azeotrope. This is because the column isn't adequately long enough to sustain enough cycles. Composition increases in HBr until, when it hits 48% HBr by weight, there's a massive density change, and water vapor switches suddenly to azeotropic 48% HBr. Because this is where the liquid and vapor compositions become identical, and it boils like a pure substance at 124 degrees Celsius. You know, I really love when theory aligns perfectly with the experiment. I literally switched the flasks at exactly 124 degrees C, when a sudden denser liquid started coming over. You can see the massive change in density, how the new liquid dripping in kind of refracts light differently. Now, okay, I just realized this is going to contradict my previous statement, but the temperature somehow rose to 136 degrees Celsius during the distillation, which is theoretically impossible, right? I already distilled the liquid once, which means there's no sulfuric acid or other salts in this distilling flask. So what the heck? My best guess is superheating of the azeotrope. Even beyond 124C though, it was still crystal clear, so I continued collecting. Because there's no possible other substance to come over other than the azeotrope, right? We'll be verifying its purity soon anyways. Step 6. Purity check and yield. Now this is our final aqueous HBr, which should be 48% by weight hydrobromic acid. To verify though, I got a scale and poured in exactly 50 mils to the meniscus. Now, I just need to look at the mass of HBr, and dividing that by the volume gives us exactly 1.4802, which is literally on the spot the theoretical value for 48% HBr. That's actually pretty good. We can be sure now that this is indeed azeotropic hydrobromic acid. Step 7. Some interesting but dangerous tests. However, why stop here, right? Of course we're going to do some tests with it, and the first one I attempted was the classic aluminum foil and acid experiment. After pouring in some of our HBr and throwing a ball of aluminum into it, it kinda did nothing. For an entire 5 minutes, nothing happened, and I was honestly kinda confused at first. It did eventually get going though, And according to my research, I think it's because HBr can't break through the aluminum oxide as well as HCl can, hence leading to a slower reaction at the start. Now that was pretty violent. So next, we're going to be doing something even more violent. Into a test tube, I mixed hydrogen peroxide with HBr, and you can see it slowly turn orange. This verifies the presence of elemental bromine. Peroxide oxidizes our acid to form bromine. It got more and more orange, and to stop the oxidation process, we can add in some sodium thiosulfate, a reducing agent, which reacts with the oxidized bromine and reduces it back to bromide. It may also react vigorously with any remaining peroxide, which I think it kinda did, resulting in a rise in temperature. Do not repeat this, but in fact, it got so violent that it started to bubble over and sprayed all over my fume hood, so bromine kinda got everywhere. Not a lot of it though. So if you're gonna ask, the cleanup was not fun. But wait, that's not even the best part yet. Remember our sodium thiosulfate? Well, one cool thing we can do is to react it with concentrated acid. As you can see, it violently forms a yellow foam, which is elemental sulfur. I also wanted to test my fume hood's power at containing the sulfur dioxide vapor's form, so I kinda just did this for fun. However, the strange thing is, I wasn't hit with a sharp choking smell. I was hit with a strong rotten egg smell, and I knew right away that hydrogen sulfide was present. I had no idea how it would have formed though, as it's not a product of the main reaction. If anyone has any ideas on the pathway, please let me know down below. Anyways, I hope you all liked the video, and I'll be using all the reagents I've made up to now in future videos on more complex organic synthesis and projects. If you had a good time, please consider subscribing. It'll help me out a lot. Step 8, thank you. If you made it here, truly, thanks a lot. I also want to thank my patrons, whether on YouTube or Patreon, for supporting me on this Garage Lab journey, and allowing this to all be possible. I will provide behind the scenes, early access, shoutouts, and more. If you would like to support a high school student like me, just a couple of dollars would go a long way in helping this channel to continue providing quality and educational chemistry content. Anyways, thank you for watching till the end, and please consider clicking the subscribe button below.